Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel Ruby. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the backslide. And that is the notion that old wounds can come up or something can come up to trigger you taking steps backward from your divorce healing journey. And the most important thing to note about this before we dive into it is that this is completely normal. Nobody goes through a healing journey and only goes up. There's always going to be a fall, whether it's little or big, it may not impact you at all. It may have a huge impact and send you into that kind of fetal position where you don't want to leave your house and you're so upset. And so we're going to talk about that today. Backwards days don't erase the healing that you've already accomplished. It is so important to realize this. All of the healing that you've done and the steps you've taken to better yourself and become the highest version of you, to get towards that joy, that happiness, and creating your new life after divorce, that's still there. And so if you have a bad day, please don't let yourself think that you're going to now slide down into this rabbit hole and have to start all over, because that's typically not the case. It's just, like I said, something that is normal. So let's jump into why backward steps can happen. And one of the reasons is that we get triggered by something. I'll share a little personal story with you about that. A few weeks ago, I received a text message from my former spouse. It triggered me. There were two. The first one, I think, was an attempt to maybe heal the rift between us, which I would love. I've always wanted that. And I was actually kind of read it with a little bit of skepticism, but thought, okay, maybe this is the beginning and that's great. And then later in the day came a second one. And that one was really triggering to me. And I got really upset for a moment. And I didn't think about, hey, all this healing work I've done and everything, my life is wonderful and I'm happy now. And I obviously help people get that way. But then I let myself feel that frustration and anger and hurt for a while. And then I really had to start doing more work and releasing and letting go of the things that I knew were not who I am, and realize that those messages affected my energy, and the energy that they conveyed wasn't something that I wanted to allow into my world. It's a perfect example of how you can get triggered with something and you can still move forward. There could be total new sources of stress in your life. Maybe you change jobs. Maybe you're not getting your spousal support or child support payments and you need money. Maybe you're just having some other kind of struggles, or maybe you're dating people and that's not working out so well for you and you're not meeting, great people that you'd like to be with. So no matter what those stressors are, that's another reason we can have a backslide, backward steps in our healing journey. Also, we can grief comes in cycles, right? And you probably know this after living many years in your life, that something can happen that's a grievous journey for us, and we might take some time to really be sad and feel low and feel down, and then we get happy, and then something else can trigger us and we can feel the grief again. And again, that is such a normal thing in divorce healing, and that can lead to the backslide as well. And the last thing is when we have kind of a rewiring of our patterns. And I have another podcast on patterns and changing our stories and changing our patterns. And sometimes when we do this, we might kind of feel ourselves, or we might not even notice that we're slipping back into an old pattern. Maybe the pattern is telling yourself that you're not good enough, right? And you might slip back into that after feeling really good. And then you start noticing you're feeling down. Why am I feeling down? And again, this backslide is normal. So backward steps happen, and divorce healing is never a straight line. even when you get to that point where you feel like you're doing really great, you can always kind of have a little setback. And so it's good to know this, because if you're prepared for it and you start having negative feelings or something triggers you, you can realize what's happening and you can work on getting back on track. Since divorce healing, or any kind of healing really, is not always linear, it doesn't just go in a straight line. Sometimes there's this healing loop that we go through, and that's kind of a norm again for the divorce healing journey. Sometimes we revisit emotions from a new level of awareness. So in other words, we might have felt really angry or frustrated or scared in our marriage, or as we were coming out of our marriage and moving into a different phase of our lives. But then now we might be healed a little bit or healed a lot, and we start to revisit some of those emotions. And again, with the example I gave, my own personal example that I gave a few moments ago, you might revisit these emotions because you're triggered by something, right? And so we have to realize that it's not a repeating of where we were back then when we first experienced those emotions from a place of not having been healed. It is really a deepening of the healing that you're going through when you experience these emotions again, after you've done a lot of healing work. And so you need to change the mindset and look at it as, okay, I'm having these feelings, I'm triggered, I'm having these emotions, it's making me feel like I'm being brought back in time before I did the healing work, and oh my gosh, maybe I am slipping, maybe I am going to have to start all over. No. Look at that as part of your journey and part of a deepening of that healing journey. A deepening of your emotions, a deepening of your strength in becoming the new you. And if you are prepared again for these backslides, which can happen, these back steps, you will be able to look at it in that way. And each loop will bring you more clarity and more stability and more emotional strength. And these things are all really wonderful to be able to recognize when they're happening and to help us to get out of that loop, and so we don't get stuck. And last is you recognize the old patterns instead of letting yourself fall victim to them and become stuck again. And again, this is because you've done the work, because you are now in a better place. So when these So when these backslides happen, just take that pause and really look at what's going on and where you are and what it means that you're having this situation and how you can move forward. But don't forget to really look deeply and realize that this isn't the same thing that happened before you had to start your healing journey. Even if the trigger may be the same, you can react from a different place now, or respond from a different place now, because you have gone through the healing and you have done that. You've lived that. And so these little reminders, I look at them as actually really good things to remind me that I'm on the right path still, and that I am strong, and that I am a wonderful human being, and that I can actually heal by preventing my heart from closing, whether it be from known things or from unknown things, triggers that might happen, which I had no idea were going to happen, or maybe something known that I started feeling a certain way on my own. Maybe I revisited something and I started getting really down. All those things produce negative energy that can close our heart. And one of the most important things in your healing journey from divorce is that you open your heart, because that is when you can allow in love for yourself first and foremost, and then possibly for another if that's what you decide down the road. But closing your heart is really it pauses your healing journey. So it is so important to keep your heart open and to realize if there's negative energy coming in from someone else, from yourself, from a situation, from a trigger, that you can get back to opening your heart, and you need to that's the goal. Next, I want to talk about the spiral of shame, because as you know, I've talked about this many times on my podcast, that divorce is still seen in many cultures, many societies, religions, family groups as being something that's shameful. And this label that is put on divorce can really lead a lot of people to be very judgmental of themselves and the choices they're making relating to their divorce and whether they should even get divorced at all. And maybe they've come through the divorce and now they're starting to heal and they're feeling shame that they went through it, even though it's past. And again, this is a backslide, but it's very normal. These backward steps can often trigger self-criticism and fear that we're failing all over again. Maybe you had the fear you were failing, or you were a failure, or maybe your former spouse tells you all the time you failed the marriage, you were a failure. Whatever it is, or your family, or maybe your religious beliefs tell you that the divorce was a failure. And so when we get into this kind of spiral of shame, these feelings might come up again and take us steps back. And so, like I said in the last situation with the healing loop that I was talking about, it's so important to realize that when you have these spirals of shame, you have to reframe them, and you have to see your steps as not failures, but as a continuation of your healing journey, as normal to have the backslide, to not go in this straight line of healing, because otherwise you wouldn't be human, right? We're not these super bionic beings that can just move forward and completely forget about everything else that shaped us before, in the marriage, after the marriage, while we were doing our healing. So it's okay to have this shame. It's okay to go through this loop of healing, but we have to keep in mind that these are just steps that are deepening our journey, that are proving to us that we actually are healing, not failing. And next, I want to talk about looking at signs and seeing signs that are actually progressing in the healing journey, even if it feels like we are regressing in our healing journey. One of those signs can be recovery, and it can be that you're recovering quicker than you ever did. So maybe you've done all the healing work to let some things go. Maybe let's take the example of you were told in your marriage or toward the end of your marriage that you weren't capable of love. That was something I was told. I wasn't capable of love. I wasn't capable of intimacy. And I did a lot of healing work. Obviously, I'm capable of both. And I did a lot of work on that and really opening my heart to prove to myself that I am capable of love. Now, if something happens to trigger me, like the example I gave earlier, I can recover much quicker because I've already done all that healing work. So I see it as really a blessing to remind me of how strong I am and to remind me of how much work I've done. And it actually makes me feel good because it also makes me aware or hypersensitive to my own emotional needs, right? So that's a plus and not a negative. And that comes from me having done all of the healing work. Another sign that you are progressing when it feels like you're not is that your communication or your boundaries that you set for others is actually improved. And the way you talk, self-talk, communicate with yourself, the way you communicate with others, and even whether it's in a romantic relationship or just anyone in general, a friend, someone you meet, a coworker, and boundaries that you're able to set better than you did before this is all proof that you know yourself better. This is proof that you've done the healing and you're not failing and you're not regressing. You're actually progressing. And last is you recognize the old patterns instead of letting yourself fall victim to them and become stuck again. And again, this is because you've done the work, because you are now in a better place. So when these backslides happen, just take that pause and really look at what's going on and where you are and what it means that you're having this situation and how you can move forward. But don't forget to really look deeply and realize that this isn't the same thing that happened before you had to start your healing journey. Even if the trigger may be the same, you can react from a different place now or respond from a different place now because you have gone through the healing and you have done that. You've lived that. And so these little reminders, I look at them as actually really good things to remind me that I'm on the right path still and that I am strong and that I am a wonderful human being and that I can actually heal by preventing my heart from closing, whether it be from known things or from unknown things, triggers that might happen, which I had no idea were going to happen, or maybe something known that I started feeling a certain way on my own. Maybe I revisited something and I started getting really down. All those things produce negative energy that can close our heart. And one of the most important things in your healing journey from divorce is that you open your heart, because that is when you can allow in love for yourself first and foremost, and then possibly for another if that's what you decide down the road. But closing your heart is really, it pauses your healing journey. So it is so important to keep your heart open and to realize if there's negative energy coming in from someone else, from yourself, from a situation, from a trigger, that you can get back to opening your heart. And you need to that's the goal. And now I'm going to talk about how to handle these backwards days, these backslides that you have in a healthy way. And number one is really to let yourself feel the emotion without judging it, without judging yourself. And I already talked about that a little bit. And number two is to use grounding tools to help you get back to that even keel space where you are feeling better, or at least where you realize that you're not falling down and failing, but you're just being reminded that something that triggered you or something that you brought up and made you feel down can actually heal. And some of the ways you can use, some of the grounding tools you can use are breath work, tapping, somatic release, journaling, meditation, and there's so many great tools. And if you look back in my library of podcasts, you'll see so many of these. And I encourage you, if you haven't seen those episodes, to watch them, because they really might teach you something that you haven't tried before and could really help. And the next way to handle these backward days is to reach out for support from friends, family, or even professionals. You may coaches, therapists, whatever it may be. And I have a whole podcast on support networks and getting help. So check that out as well. And then last is, I mentioned this already before, practicing positive self-talk. Talk that acknowledges your pain, because you don't want to pretend you didn't feel that way or ignore it or think that it's really bad and try to just move on. You want to acknowledge the pain and you want to feel the pain, and you also want to acknowledge your progress, right? Because while you might be having a step backwards, you, again, like I said, you have made incredible progress in your healing journey. So pat yourself on the back and really become aware of that. Next, let's focus on how you can find a lesson in the backslide, in this little slip you had from your healing journey, this little digression. How can you look for the lesson so you can really heal better and continue on your healing journey? Because remember, our healing journey never ends. We're always healing. I know maybe that sounds daunting to some people if you've gone through so much healing to get to where you are now, but it's actually a wonderful, beautiful thing, because you're constantly evolving in your healing journey and becoming a better version of you. You're not changing you. You're just becoming a better you. And so let's talk about how we can look for the lessons in this. One is to ask, what is this backward step trying to show me? And I really can't help you answer that because it's something very personal, but you can work with someone like me, a divorce healing coach, a recovery coach, or a therapist or a life coach, whatever it is, if you can't find the answers on your own. But I think if you just sit with them and through your meditation or your breath work, ask why you are maybe, or what lesson you may be able to learn from the experience, it might come to you. It might not be automatic right away, but it might come to you. And then the next way we can look for a lesson is to see if we have any needs that haven't been met. And really, this is going to depend on what the trigger was or what the situation was that caused the backslide. And it really goes back in time to one of the first podcasts I did where I talk about making a list of how you see your new life, how you see the changes happening and what you would like to see in the future as you go through your healing journey and become this highest version of you. So is there some kind of a need that you haven't met yet in your healing journey? And again, only you can answer this, but you can really start kind of asking yourself these questions to see if that comes up for you. And then the next one would be looking at the boundaries that we've created for ourselves, for others when it comes to relating to ourselves, and really determine whether we need to tweak that boundary in any way, maybe strengthen it, maybe redefine it completely. And that's, again, something you can work with in your breath work, in your journaling, in talking to others if you need help, but really delving into that topic of what kind of lessons you can learn from the backslide. And finally, you want to ask about old wounds. And if this is an old wound that's coming up, that's triggering you, or that's maybe you were somebody who never spoke your mind in the relationship and never said what you wanted, for example, and you've worked through that now and you're great at expressing yourself and you're great at setting the boundaries to get those things you want and to make sure that you do love yourself wholly and you open your heart. And so this could be a lesson where you still need to heal from those old wounds. And so you might need to do some more work on that. And again, sometimes it helps to have people to help you do that. Finally, we want to look at these backslides and figure out how those steps, those backslides actually promote growth in our healing journeys and growth in becoming the highest version of ourselves. The first way to know that this is actually growth, and even though it feels like we're going backwards, is that we're revisiting our past from a completely different and empowered place. And that only comes from the healing work, from doing the healing work. And second is we're processing things that we were too overwhelmed to process at an earlier time, before we started healing, or maybe in the earlier stages of our healing, maybe as we were coming through a divorce or out of a divorce. And so if we notice that we're thinking about these things in different ways, and then that is truly a benefit to us. And last is that we're stepping into this new life that we are creating for ourselves by refining our identity. And again, this is becoming the highest version of ourselves. It's not that we're becoming a new person and we're changing our identity, but we're becoming the highest version. You're becoming the highest version of you. I'm becoming the highest version of me. And that is how we know that these backward steps, these backslides, are actually helping us to grow. My final parting words on this topic of backslides in divorce healing are these. One is, again, to remember you're not alone. Realize that you are human, and as a human, you feel things, and it is normal to feel things. It is normal to have backward steps, and those steps will make you stronger so that you can go forward and still create more beauty for yourself and be the best version of you. Next is that healing is messy for everybody, not just you. And it's okay to make messes. It's okay to have messes happen, right? Because again, it's just going to make you become a better version of yourself. And backslides are part of an amazing spiritual and emotional transformation that happens within. And so again, just honor these times, even though they may be painful, because they're going to let you come to a better place. And that's the whole purpose of the healing journey. And finally, even though we have the backslides, even though we feel like we might be falling down that well, we're not. It is actually leading us to move forward to a better place. So I hope that this podcast on backslides and healing will help you to realize that this is just a normal part of your journey and it's okay, and give you some tips on how to deal with them and move forward, because you are an incredible, empowered, beautiful human being, and you are more than capable of healing and having a wonderful life after divorce. If you enjoyed this podcast or any of the others, please do me the honor of subscribing to this channel, liking the podcasts, sharing them, because you never know whether someone else might benefit from some of these lessons that we talk about here on the podcast. And I would love for you to follow me. So subscribe, like, share, and comment, because all of those things tell me that you are enjoying this journey with me on the Divorce to Bliss podcast and make me excited to keep finding more things to share with you so that your healing journey can be amazing and incredible, and you can become the best version of you. Thank you for being with me today.